On July 7th, 2020, County Executive Marcus J. Molinaro held a listening town hall, an opportunity for people of color to talk about their experiences living a life as a person of color in Dutchess County. Over 300 people tuned in to the webinar, some people of color, but also some white people who wanted to hear, to listen, to understand. For over an hour, people shared their personal stories, their experiences, and had an opportunity to speak not only to Marcus Molinaro, but also to co-host Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, and a panel of community leaders and other agency heads, government officials who also wanted to hear, what is your experience as a person of color in Dutchess County? Marc, what were your original goals for this listening town hall?
I have to admit, I didn't know what my goals were. We thought, though, it was a moment in time that we needed to pause and give people the opportunity to speak and to be heard. As we got closer and worked with you and others, it was abundantly clear that we needed to use the town hall as a means to allow people of color in this community to speak their story, their experience, to ensure that there were elected officials, most of whom look a lot like me, who are on the other end of that call or that video, listening, clearly listening, and then somehow use that passion that we heard and transform it into policy, to take the concern, the alarm, the anguish, the angst, and some degree of hope and optimism, and convert that into some progress for people. And it was clear to me that the conversation alone is insufficient by far. And so going in, I think we defined the goal of as turning passion into policy and progress, and it's clear to me that that's necessary.
Mm-hmm. Karmen Smallwood, you lead the county's youth empowerment efforts. When you were first asked by Marc to join the panel, what were your hopes? What did you hope would be accomplished?
I wanted to speak about my personal experiences being an African American female in leadership positions, but I was concerned about the plan to move forward. I just didn't want people to talk about their experiences without a plan to really start to implement some changes in the county. So my participation in it was twofold. Number one, I wanted to speak about my experiences, to provide insight into what I've gone through as a woman of color in leadership. But I also wanted other people in the community to feel comfortable to speak out as well, that hopefully by seeing me on the screen that they might somehow feel comfortable to speak out and to speak up about the injustices that they've experienced.
Marc, what might you do differently if you were to do another session? Did you feel like the goals were achieved?
We wanted it to be about listening, but the future sessions, if you will, need to be more conversation. I do think that those who speak out need to know that they're being listened to, and that being given the opportunity to be heard always sounds to me like we're doing somebody the favor, when in reality we in elected office have to represent those voices. And so I do think that the next steps of this, and I think it's an iterative process, I don't think we can ever stop. It has to be dialogue, and it has to be conversation, and it has to include people who don't often have those conversations, because it isn't good enough just to have people of color speak to people in authority. It needs to be all of us engaged in confronting not only the injustices, but also the racism, the intolerance that exists to one extent, on one extent of that spectrum or another, in just about everyone. And how we confront that together, I think, is critically important.
Several speakers expressed their frustration with what they've experienced as a lot of talk, no action. And I think that what you both have expressed today about the need for the next step for action, turning people's experiences and their frustrations into meaningful action will be important. And there were others who felt that there needed to be more discussion, more sharing, especially so that people who are in decision-making positions can understand what it's like to be different and understand the challenges in their daily lives. So for people who want action, what are some of the things that your office can do?
First, I do want to say that we've taken on some important issues over the course of the last several years, and we probably are just not very good at communicating to the audiences that need to hear it. I'm very proud that this county reestablished the Human Rights Commission in a way that's full time. I mean, we're one of the few that really has committed to that. There needs to be more. I mean, it can't simply be talking sessions, and there needs to be sort of this infiltration, if you will, into schools and housing and into community life, by the Human Rights Commission about the kinds of issues we have to confront together. The other is, I will say this, I'm very proud this county was one of the first in the state to what's called ban the box. We knew some years ago that individuals, in particular those who were in the criminal justice system, were almost entirely alienated when they returned to the community, because if you apply for a government job anywhere, you check a box that says, I was once incarcerated, I once committed a crime. That really meant that in particular communities of color individuals are automatically written off by employers, and we wanted to end that practice, and we did. So every employment opportunity in this county no longer has that box. That isn't good enough either. So the next steps for us have to be transforming the listening into engagement, into the conversation, and then have that infuse our policymaking. There are steps that we're going to take immediately. We talked about this a couple months ago. COVID and the pandemic got in the way. The appointment of a diversity and inclusion officer in county government. We're obligated to have somebody represent equal opportunity in county government, but we need to do a whole lot more than that, and we really have a challenge. So I've authorized moving ahead with the appointment of a diversity officer. We're advertising that position. That person's job is going to be to get into communities and really prepare individuals to access government jobs, municipal jobs, civil service jobs. In this state, sadly, the civil service system sucks, plain and simple. It is an outdated structure that was meant to protect against nepotism and cronyism, but what it's happened is it's created an institutionalized structure that, frankly, unless you know of the test and know how to take the test, many of those tests having very little to do with the actual job, you're not going to get employed by government, because we can only pick from the top three. That's even for law enforcement. So we have to do better at preparing people to access that system, but we also have to challenge that system, and that requires some assistance at the state level. Beyond that, I think importantly, we have to confront law enforcement and the need to modernize policy and practices to be sure that everyone in law enforcement is treating everyone equally. So we did launch initially and very aggressively a collaborative approach to modernizing our practices. So that's looking at policy, it's looking at practices, it's looking at training, and it's really saying to every law enforcement agency in the county who don't report to me, and that needs to be understood. The only way in order to get them to move is to impress upon them to do that. But we do now have buy-in of every police agency. We've had now sessions with every supervisor and mayor that is responsible for a police agency, and we're going to create modern, universal practices that clearly speak to the issue of injustice in communities of color, and demand that those policies and practices are not only written on paper, but really inform the culture of law enforcement. And there's buy-in, and our agencies are ready to do it. They know the challenge ahead of them, and we're going to press, and we're going to use stakeholders in the community to inform and make sure that the decisions are being informed. And then lastly and immediately, and Karmen and I readily admit, I said, just sort of joked about this, we've been talking in the city of Poughkeepsie about a youth empowerment center for generations. We've been talking about transforming the old Y into something. Time has long gone, come and passed, that we should have acted already. Now, I don't want to dismiss and sort of use this as a distraction. We acknowledge that that's something to be careful about. But it is clear to us that if we're going to provide equality of opportunity, we have to invest in our young people, and it has to begin here in the city of Poughkeepsie. So I was committed, and we are committed to spending a significant sum of money to partner with individual organizations in the city of Poughkeepsie to transform the former Y. In fact, demolish the former Y and build a state-of-the-art youth empowerment facility here. And Dutchess County is ready to match the expense to make that happen, and now's the time to do it.
I want to ask you about somebody who serves as a diversity officer. When you started to describe the role of this person, you described somebody who will be out in the community. And I'm wondering whether there will be a role for this person in holding the feet to the fire, the people who in fact do have the power and do have the influence, who do make the policy, or will this person only be working in the community? I'm very cognizant of what you described in terms of police departments, law enforcement. They're not under your jurisdiction. You are interested in trying to influence things so that they will, in fact, have better policies and that culture will change. Could the diversity officer have any role in helping that to happen?
Yes. The diversity officer's responsibility is not only to help inform the community, but to hold government accountable. And because that individual will be embedded in our human resources department, we do oversee the civil service practices of every government employment entity in Dutchess County. Every town, village, and city has to make those hiring decisions through our HR department, our civil service department. This individual will not only be out in the community, but will have a seat at the table, informing us, holding us accountable, and really demanding that every entity in Dutchess making a hiring decision is doing its best to diversify.
Karmen, as the head of the Youth Empowerment Initiative, what are your hopes in terms of making changes in systems and processes? Everybody talks about systemic change.
My passion really lies in working with youth. I'm a parent of a teenager, and I'm very sensitive to his needs and experiences as he emerges into adulthood. So, I look to him first because he's in my home, and I want to make sure that as he becomes an adult, he has the tools and the resources and the confidence to make major changes in his community. So what I want for young people is to be able to provide them with the education, the access to resources, and the advocates in the community that can help them create changes that they want to see. Our young people are brilliant. They have awesome ideas. They just need some caring adults that can help them move their ideas into the action and implementation stages.
The county executive's office has a role, has a mandate, and what it can control is actually mandated by law. As you said before, there are some things that simply are not under your purview or influence. But what are some of the other agencies or organizations that can address issues that your office cannot? I know that you work with other agencies hand in hand. You do a lot of collaboration. What are some of those agencies?
First, we have to begin with, in government, with the other layers. So 20 towns, 8 villages, and 2 cities make up Dutchess County. They all have their own boards. They all have their own supervisors and mayors. We'll use the bully pulpit. We'll use our resources that we can leverage to get collaboration. And quite frankly, after 25 years of serving in elected office here in Dutchess County, in one fashion or another, we'll use the relationships we have to move people. But we do need our municipalities to be hand in hand. I believe there's buy-in, but I don't know that we all know what that means. And I do think that the conversation that we had, the town hall that we had, and that we sort of, my face and Sean's face were front and center. I think that conversation has to occur continuously in each of these municipalities because they need to know that there are voices in their community that want change and deserve that change and representation at the table. So influencing that and those layers of government have to be a part of the decision making. As it relates to law enforcement, again, the police agencies do function independently, and they have a role and responsibility. And using, again, the leverage we have and the partnership through the sheriff's office and others, we need that to happen, right? We need their buy-in. Schools, school districts, they're mandated to do certain things. There's only so many hours in a day. But every school needs to really think about how they're teaching history, how they're combating bullying, how they're addressing perhaps instances of intolerance or racism in their own institution, and then lean on us. Our resources through the Human Rights Commission, through our Behavioral and Community Health Department, to provide the social, emotional training, the trauma-informed care, and the support necessary to be there in a school setting to confront these challenges and really inform, I think, in it from an education perspective, how shall I say, holistic and honest history. The other, though, is we need the state and federal government to act as well. The governor's emergency order requiring the update to policies is a minimum standard, and we embrace it, but it is simply checking a few boxes. We do need the state to invest more in education so that we get quality regardless of where you live. We need the state to invest more in mental health and trauma-informed care so that we can be there in communities and instances where a holistic and sort of caring and compassionate response is necessary. And we need the state to confront hiring practices so that we can, again, follow the law. We don't want to create a scenario where cronyism nepotism is what occurs. You only hire your friends. But frankly, that needs to be confronted as well. And the federal government has a role that, quite frankly, it has diminished over the years. And that's both out of partisanship and politics, but also simply out of resources. The federal government doesn't invest like it used to. So that means investing in housing and community development and ensuring that when we're making decisions, in particular at the local level, if it's about, for instance, community development, there can be development, but it can't be development with displacement. We can't end up destroying communities, as we once did as a society, mostly poorer communities. We can't allow that to happen. So there's got to be this balance and commitment by every layer of government. And I promise, and I think I've used my bully pulpit pretty effectively these last 8 years, but I know that this is a moment in time where we need to ensure that focusing on particularly issues of racism and support for communities of color needs to be a priority, and we have to, people who look like me, have to remind ourselves of that constantly.
Karmen, I'm interested to hear from you whether during the listening town hall there were comments or concerns that were shared that made you think, oh, I wish they had called my office. Or if that wasn't the case, are there things that you are already aware of that you know that your office can address and that you're looking forward to confronting?
I left the town hall meeting feeling exhausted. Exhausted because there's so much work that needs to be done. But the next day, I got a message from a young woman who spoke during the town hall. And she has this awesome idea to change culture and community. And I reached out to her, I called her, and she was so surprised that I just called her back. And she just didn't realize that someone in my position would take the time to call her back. And I said, wow, we've got to create space and opportunity for young people to be heard and to really be listened to. And I told her, I just want to hear your story and I want to find a way to help you. And so we've been having conversations and emailing each other and coming up with tremendous ideas on how to partner. And I want other young people to feel that they have that opportunity as well. I think that we have an awesome opportunity right now to show young people that we can go beyond just the listening town hall, and then we can take their ideas and move them into a way that they can actually see that progress is being made. So I'm really excited about that.
I also came away feeling exhausted, and it took a little time to decompress, but I also did come away with hope as well. And Marc, I'm wondering if you had any thoughts along the same lines. Did you come away with any feelings of hope? Do you feel as if there are answers to some of the questions and concerns?
I didn't sleep at all that night, and I don't say that for sympathy. My mind was racing. I heard so much anguish, and I heard so much anger, and at moments I felt ashamed that, frankly, there was so little that either we did or could do in that moment, and quite frankly, it was a moment of reckoning in some ways, like you and others. First, I know that people communicate the way they communicate, and it's not for me to judge, right? It isn't for me to say, well, you should, express yourself in this way. So the emotion that was there, even if it was based in anger and frustration, I still think there was a voice of optimism in everyone that this moment would be something that would create greater opportunity, greater access, greater justice, equality. I sensed it. So the question for us is what do we do with it, right? And how do we ensure that people, even in the moments of great anger, recognize that anger can be used in a way that will bring some productivity, some progress. That's the commitment that we make. But I left, I think, feeling the right way, which was, a whole spectrum of emotion, including a degree of hope. But I can tell you, it impressed greatly upon me. It just did. And it reminded me that, when I was once a village mayor, you're sort of on the street all the time talking to people. We can't lose that personal connection that people are supposed to have with their elected officials. And again, giving people a voice isn't doing them a favor. It's making sure their government works for them. And I think that's really the challenge that we have to confront now, making sure that everyone has a seat at the table, so that so the government's functioning in a way that serves everybody.
Marc, you have had some very successful COVID-19 town halls, and this listening town hall obviously was modeled partially on that. With the COVID-19 town halls, there was constant update. I'm wondering what kind of updates you will be able to give folks so that they know what's happening. What are the actions that are coming out of what you've heard?
Today begins that. This is sort of a what did we hear session. As we take steps to modernize police practices with law enforcement agencies, there will be similar town hall meetings to talk about both the status of that effort, but also to inform that effort. As we launch efforts to diversify county government, we're going to have similar sessions to explain what that means. Karmen runs an initiative we call Path to Promise. At its heart is equality of opportunity, access for everyone, regardless where they start in their walk of life, to the support and the structure necessary to achieve the success they define for themselves. The Path to Promise has a public outreach component that needs to be constant. I think the one lesson that I learned, however, is it's probably important for us not to talk about these things in some, subjective way. I think we need to say to the community, today is a conversation about this, and so that we're focused on the deliverable that we hope to have, and I think you'll see that we'll have regular conversation, regular update about our progress, and regular reporting as to where we are in that effort. Sadly, we will also have moments that require us to react. There will be incidents, there will be crime, there will be injustice. I think it's important that the public also be given an opportunity to see their leaders and to express to them what they felt in that moment and what action is demanded when those things do happen.
Marc, what is Path to Promise, and how did you decide that this was needed?
We believed that if we're going to spend resources to assist young people, we have to know the outcome. And we know that in particular young people, especially those who may have had trauma in their lives, that there are moments of development where our support is critically important to achieving that next stage of development, achieving greater success. And so as a community, we spend millions and millions of dollars, towns, villages, school districts, on youth services. Our focus needs to be on really confronting the challenge. It could be issues of poverty, nutrition, education, lack of access to jobs, lack of access to recreation alternatives. If we're going to spend those resources, we need to be able to show that we're making an impact in the life of a young person, measure that success, monitor that success, and then ultimately ensure, more importantly than our measurement of it, that young people are actually achieving the success they define for themselves. And we know that there are institutional barriers that exist, so we've got to break those down. We've got to focus our resources effectively, and we've got to be there to help a young person from birth to employment get through those development stages safely, with great health, great access to support, and with the achievement and success they define for themselves. And Path to Promise is this concept of this constant monitoring and investment in young people at the moment in time they need our help. And I think it's unlike a lot I think that others are doing, but it's critically important to us, and Karmen leads that effort.
When you were appointed head of this Youth Empowerment Initiative, what have you inherited?
A huge challenge, but one that I was really excited to be involved in. As I mentioned, I'm a parent, so I'm already passionate about young people and what their needs are, but I also really gravitated towards this idea of looking at child development from a holistic lens, making sure that we look at everything from their health and nutrition to mental health to their education, because you can't just focus on one entity and think that that's all that a young person needs to thrive. You have to look at all these factors and make sure that we are addressing all of them. And then also looking at the great resources that we have in our county. There are folks that have no idea about some of the great work that's already being done in our communities. So I want to create ways for people to find out what's already happening and how to get connected to these great resources.
Karmen, any last thoughts or hopes as we move forward?
As I mentioned, I left the town hall feeling exhausted, but it was that conversation with that young woman that renewed this energy and optimism in me. And if I can continue to focus on the good things that are going on and the passionate young people in our community, that will help to make all of this worthwhile. I'm certainly thankful for the opportunity to have participated in the town hall. And I know there are a lot of groups having formal and informal crucial conversations as a result of that event. So that in of itself is a great accomplishment. My mission is to continue to have these conversations with our young people and support them as they implement changes in their communities.
I'm an optimist by nature. I'm a hopeaholic, as Gloria Steinem used to say. So I'm looking forward to seeing the actions that are going to come as a result of the hopes as well as the frustrations that were expressed by those who participated in the listening town hall. I look forward to coming back and speaking with Marc and Karmen and others about things that have actually taken place as a result of those conversations.